Official weight, 155.1 pounds. He's fighting out of Milton Keynes in England and brings with him to the cage a professional record of 6 wins with 6 defeats. Introducing Tom Mearns. Standing opposite him in the cage, fighting out of the red corner. He stands 5 feet 11 and a half inches tall. Official weight, 155.8 pounds. He is fighting out of Paris in France and brings with him to the cage a professional record of 6 wins with 3 defeats. Introducing Yassine Crazy Legs Belhadj. Your referee in charge when the action begins, Mr. Mark Goddard.
The best in the business, Mr. Mark Goddard, about to get this one underway. 3 5-minute rounds if they need them in the Cage Warriors lightweight division. Tom Mearns in the black trunks, Yassine Belhadj in the black with white trim shorts. And immediately Mearns looking to get in his man's face here.
Yeah, wasting no time to put the pressure on. You know, like you said, this could be a question of Mearns' strategy being to try and take his man down. It looks like that is the plan straight away.
Yeah, wasting absolutely no time there.
Yeah, very nicely done. You know, we see this position so much. You see how Tom's elevating the legs. When you lift those legs up, it stops your opponent from lifting up their hips. Now he's trapped those legs with his legs. This is going to stop the opponent from being able to walk up the wall, which is exactly what Crazy Legs is trying to do now. He managed to get back up, but Danny Batten in the corner saying no rush, and I think that's actually really good advice for when he's on the ground there. He still looked like a little bit amped up from the beginning of the fight. He was in a good position. He needs to slow down a little bit, try and control.
Nice straight shots from Belhadj. Knee up the middle. Mearns has got to be careful. Now we know he's got a heck of a chin on him. He can take big shots, but it's not where he wants to be. Closes the distance again. Doesn't get the single leg though.
Oh. There you go. An over-ambitious punch there, and Belhadj finds himself on the ground. Now, this is a very different position from what we saw a little bit earlier, which is in the middle of the cage here. Very difficult to stand up. You have to out-grapple your opponent, whereas when you're on the fence, it's a different story. When your back's on the fence, you can use the fence as an assistant, basically, to try and get to your feet. So what you'll see a lot of people do once they're in this position, if they want to stand up, they'll actually start shifting their weight back and trying to shuffle back so they can use that fence. But right now, Tom's in a really good position. He's in top half guard right now. What he wants to do is try and control the upper body and use his legs to try and pass. He's immediately, in that attempt, he's transitioned straight to mount, and that can happen. If you're in half guard and Belhadj underneath, he lifted his hips up to try and bridge him off. When you lift your hips up, you open your legs. When you open your legs, you allow your opponent to get that leg out. This is a very, very strong position with almost 3 minutes on the clock left. This is a great position for Tom. It looks like he's thinking about going for a head and arm choke or arm triangle. You see how his right arm is raising his opponent's arm up above his head. What he's going to try and do, when he gets it high enough, he's going to try and bring his head to the other side, and then he's going to lock up. He releases that for a second, but that's kind of one of the main, you know, Belhadj doing a fantastic job there as Tom just loses that tightness a little bit in being able to stand back up.
Yes, got to be careful taking those knees from Belhadj. Takes a knee to the body, but is able to close the distance slightly as Mearns here. Looking for the single leg off the cage now. Nice trip from Mearns.
Yeah, fantastically done. Once again, you see how he redirected him off of the cage, off of the fence. Now he's back in a strong position. He already knows that he has the ability to take the mount, and I think if he does it this time, he's going to try and stay a lot tighter. And the way that Belhadj is trying to escape this, he's using a lot of power. He's using this big hip bump movement, and that is going to get slower and slower and weaker and less powerful the longer you keep on trying to do that throughout the fight. So expect to see if we could see the same thing happen before, which is Belhadj tries to hip bump, he tries to raise his hips, and he opens his legs too much, and Mearns can slide directly into mount from there.
I was talking to Mearns' coach, Danny Batten, last week on the Danny Batten podcast. Danny Batten podcast. And he said, look, I'd like Tom to be a featherweight. That's his ideal weight, but you know, he's got life and work commitments outside of the sport that means, you know, he just can't make that commitment to getting, you know, in the shape needed for featherweight constantly. And you know, to be competitive at a high level in such a stacked division, you've got to be able to give it your all. And you know, he's more focused here on, you know, skills and techniques than the physical side of things in terms of his training at the moment. And you can see the size difference, especially when they're on their feet. So you know, perhaps with that being said, the game plan here was always for Mearns to get on top of his man on the floor.
Yeah, and fantastic job he's done so far. Repeatedly managed to get to a top position. Right now, he's got a guillotine on. I can't quite see how the hands are connected. It's an awkward angle. This is a weird position where the angle that you're at your opponent, you can't really get the upward pressure on the neck. What you'd actually want to do from here is potentially roll onto your back to try and then get back on top, or even pull your opponent towards you. You need to change the angle because you can't be halfway off your opponent. You've got to be fully on or fully off with them on top. So, but a very, very good round for Tom, and finishing in a pretty strong position as well.
Oh, he was looking to get the crank on the neck there at the very end. And look, all Belhadj's defeats have come by way of submission, so Mearns' team have clearly spotted a vulnerability there, and let's see if he's able to get in quickly and get that takedown again in the second round. But nice uppercut from Belhadj there, and a right hand behind it. Mearns just taking a couple of shots to get the takedown there, Dan.
Yeah, this was the first takedown against the fence. Belhadj did a fantastic job of standing back up. This time I think we're going to see another takedown, maybe. Some of the striking exchanges.
Yeah, let's not forget that Belhadj did land some big, impactful strikes in that round. There was some ground and pound from Mearns, but it wasn't particularly effective.
Now, that was a beautiful takedown because you see how once he got the weight off the opponent's leg and he was just hopping on one leg, he directed him off of the fence to stop him from using the fence to stand back up, which is something that you see so many grapplers having a problem with, keeping their man on the ground when they're up against that wall.
And there's the crazy legs of Yassine Belhadj getting to work. Mearns charging in on his man, looking to link those hands behind the hips and take him for a ride.
Yeah, that's exactly it, you know, and you see how it once again redirects him away from the fence. I wouldn't be surprised if he was going to take a couple more steps to the center of the cage, but a strong position here, and very, very obvious from what we've seen so far in that first round and at the beginning of the second round that Tom is the more dominant grappler here. One easily passing the side control, 4.5 minutes on the clock. He can do a lot of damage here if he wants to. If he gets to a position to strike, he can do a lot of damage. But also, if he wants to get to a position to submit, he can absolutely do that as well. There's a lot of options for him right now.
Plenty of time left on the clock too. 4 minutes left to play with in this second round, and a third if it gets that far.
You know, side control is such an awkward position in MMA because side control is a good position if you're doing no-gi grappling, but in MMA, it's one of the positions that are weakest when it comes to striking, because if you try and create any space, you give your opponent lots of space to turn in, which is why you see a lot of people favoring the half-guard position on top opposed to side control if they want to strike. So when I see someone in side control, I'm thinking either they want to transition to the back, to the mount, or they want to try and get a submission from side control. We're seeing another guillotine attempt here, arming guillotine. He goes for the top for a second, unfortunately just doesn't get his legs in the right position, and this is something that can happen so easily with the guillotine. People see the neck, they go for that guillotine submission, but they don't get their body in the right position, they don't get their legs in the right position, and that means that Tom's found himself on his back here. The question is, can he get the sweep from this position? He wants to get back to a top dominant position. Belhadj, you know, I'm pretty sure that he wants to be on his feet, so if he can break the grip of Tom behind his back, you know, I would expect him to want to get a forearm in front of the face, push off and stand back up.
Oh, Belhadj looking to perhaps tie something up there.
Yeah, he was looking for a guillotine of his own here. Now I wonder if we're standing guillotine here. The elbow's coming high. Tom's having to really defend this. This might be a pretty good position actually, because Tom isn't moving at all, and that's what worries me. When someone doesn't move, there we go. Now we see the defense. But when you defend, it's all about Belhadj. Okay, that so much just happened there, but the high position is still there. This is very difficult to get out of. Wow, so much went on there. It's hard for me to try and sum it up, but basically, You know, Tom, it looked for a second there like that guillotine was really, really on. It was deep, it was underneath the neck, and the elbow was high, and that's the important thing. Tom did a good job of taking the fight to the ground, and then there was a split second. It was all about, can Belhadj get his legs in the right position? He didn't, but what he did have, he had a super high elbow position. I thought it was going to be over for a second, and then he managed to clear that high elbow. Now it's Tom's turn to go for his second guillotine attempt. He's standing right now, but you see how his elbow's low. This is the big difference between the standing guillotine that we just saw from Belhadj and the standing guillotine that we're seeing from Tom. So a pretty weak position. The standing guillotine only effective if that elbow's very, very high.
Belhadj looking to go to work in the clinch here with those knees and elbows. Mearns is going to be very careful here.
Yeah, very strong clinch position there. Doing a lot of damage. You know, wouldn't be surprised if Mearns is going to drop down and try and get this back in the grappling, and really all that whole exchange, really crazy grappling exchange, all came from giving up that top position for a guillotine attempt that wasn't quite there.
Gritty contest between Mearns and Belhadj, as we expected. Let's see if Belhadj can create some space here to get those knees and elbows back to work. Seems to be content just leaning on Mearns up against the cage at the moment, perhaps just getting a little breather here. Got 30 seconds left to play with in this one.
Really interesting round, it's hard to say. You know, we saw some dominance early, you know, an early takedown, good controlling of the position, but then really, you know, that guillotine attempt from Belhadj looked really, really tight, and for a couple of seconds there where Tom stopped moving, I was thinking, actually, he could tap him with this, and I think it was probably very, very close.
My God, I've separated the fights with 10 seconds on the clock. Belhadj looked to have slowed significantly there in terms of the striking, maybe just waiting out the round, but the arms looked a bit heavy to me there.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. There's a lot of energy output in those grappling exchanges. Very possible in trying to hold on to that guillotine choke that he's actually blown his arm down. So here's one of the scrambles earlier. This is the guillotine attempt. He's in that front headlock position. He switches. Now watch the left elbow. See how high it comes up on the shoulder. This is exactly what it wants to do. You see how Tom tries to block that high elbow position, but that position there, that forearm stopping that elbow from getting high is the only thing that kept him in the game. He loses that arm to give him the takedown attempt, and now this is where it could all have gone wrong. He passes, but the elbow is super high, manages to fight it off and pop that head out. It was all about that right arm stopping the high elbow, because the high elbow is the driving force of the guillotine finish. So it was all about that elbow fight, and Tom being able to do a fantastic job of throwing his arm over the top and keeping himself basically awake.
Third and final round underway here at the Trilogy. Tom Mearns, Yassine Belhadj. Stiff jab early from Mearns. He's catching Belhadj with that one. And let's just see if the arms still look a bit heavy for Belhadj here.
It definitely seems that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, we talked about him being the bigger man. He's carrying more weight, more muscle, and that's not always an advantage in the late rounds. There's a lot of oxygen pumping around, but he lands a big knee there. Mearns eats it like a cheese sandwich and goes straight in for the takedown.
Now let's see if he's going to try and elevate his man here and get him back off of the fence. It's so difficult to try and get a guy in a strong grappling position when his back is against the fence. Nicely done, underhook reverses. Belhadj gets his man up against the fence. Now if he wants to from here, he can disengage. We did see Belhadj go for a few takedowns before, and he did have some success in the grappling, especially with that guillotine attack. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does now. But yeah, I think he really thought he was going to finish that guillotine in the last round. He put all of his energy into trying doing that, and I imagine his arms are just absolutely bubbling with lactic acid right now.
Well, this is where he can use that height and weight advantage, leaning up against Mearns on the cage. But he's going to have to stay active. Yeah, Marc Goddard separated them from a similar position in the first. Now he steps back. Mearns goes straight back to that jab, but Belhadj trying to find a way in.
Yeah, slow takedown here, but in the middle of the cage, he can switch this single leg. Now he releases the single leg here. Belhadj doing a great job of defending that takedown.
Well, maybe the knees are a better option for Belhadj if the arms are weighing heavily. Mearns trying to bully his man back to the cage though now.
Yeah, a beautiful timing as Belhadj threw that right hand. Mearns ducked underneath. He's asking himself whether he still has the energy to lift the man above his head to bring him back to the ground. Another guillotine attempt here. I can't see if those hands are connected. If those hands are connected, we could see another, legitimate submission threat here. Keep an eye on the left elbow. If that left elbow of Belhadj comes really high, then you know that he has a good hand position there and he's going to try and get the finish again. But there we go, that high elbow. Mearns fighting it off and managing to get the head out. And back to this tight clinch. Belhadj has had such success throwing the knees from this position.
Oh, big elbow from Yassine Belhadj. Really is putting it all into these shots.
And there's everything to play for, I think, in this round. I hate to be scoring the first two. So much goes on. It's very, very hard.
Mearns looking for a knee up on the outside there. He's got just over 90 seconds left to play with. He's going to have to do something here to get some points on the board. 4 takedown attempts, non-successful for Mearns in this 4th round. He's landed 2 in both of the previous rounds.
Yeah, and I think that's a really significant fact, which is very successful early on with the takedowns. First round, second round, very, very successful. Hasn't managed to make anything stick there. He doesn't seem to be setting up his takedowns quite as much as he was doing in the first couple of rounds. There we go, a little bit more, but we're ending up in the same position that you really do see all the time, trying to use the legs to take away one of the bases of his opponent, but unable to do so. And Belhadj going to punish him for the attempt right now. But I've got to say,
big uppercut by Belhadj there. Clinch knee.
I was going to ask how much energy he's still got in those arms, and the answer is still enough.
Can he get it done here? Leg kick from Mearns into the final minute of the round. Mearns chopping away at his man, but Belhadj looking to come in and catch him with the elbow. Another heavy leg kick, and Belhadj stoically takes it into the tie clinch again. Solid elbows from Belhadj. And that damage really is piling up on Mearns now. We know how tough he is. We've seen him in scrappy fights before. Pulls guard there. Not going to have much time to do with anything with it though, Dan.
Yeah, interesting strategy. Would have been a lot more interesting if it was a couple of minutes ago, but there you go. That's the end of the fight.
I think perhaps it was more of a tactic to just get out of the way of those knees and elbows in the clinch from Belhadj.
Fantastic back and forth. Very, very different third round than we saw in the first two, and it all came down to Tom's inability to get that fight to the ground. He had so much success in the top positions in the first couple of rounds, and Belhadj just really being able to do what he needed to do to stay on his feet and then punish Tom whenever he tried to get near him.
Well, we often talk about guys who leave it all in the cage, and Tom Mearns is a guy that we've known for years is all about that life. It looks to me like Yassine Belhadj is too, slowed down significantly after that first round, but the bigger single strikes, the big impactful moments made from Belhadj. But let's not negate the grappling success that Mearns had earlier in the fight.
Yeah, and it was significant, and I think it could have gone very differently if we didn't have that guillotine attempt off of the scramble from Belhadj in the second round, which was a really, really significant, I'd say, the most significant submission attempt there.
Nice uppercut there, right through the guard of Tom Mearns. And immediately going into the tie clinch, burying the knees to the midsection. Well, the judges' scorecards are in, so let's throw it to our MC in the cage, Mr. Hal Chaplin, to make it official.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 3 rounds of mixed martial arts action, we go to our judges' scorecards. All 3 judges score this contest 29-28 in favor of your winner by way of unanimous decision in the red corner, Yassine Crazy Belhadj! Belhadj.
Belhadj takes it on the scorecards.